Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. All right.
Okay.
Well, we're super excited to have this conversation this morning. This is a super important topic because we're talking about money. And at the end of the day, when it comes to coming to this conference and learning about the opportunities that are available to you, you want to understand how the money can play into your own personal financial goals and your own success. So, Adrienne, how about we tell them a little bit about ourselves before we hop in?
All right, that sounds like a game plan. So I'll go ahead and start. Like we mentioned, my name is Adrienne Davis. I'm a certified public accountant as well as a certified financial planner. I started my career in public accounting back in the day, realized that taxes weren't my favorite thing to do, so I was able to transition to a career in financial planning where I love to help my clients and make more of an impact, seeing how our recommendations and our advice really can help people take more control of their financial future and achieve their financial goals. Okay.
Awesome. And my name is Chelsea Ransom Cooper. I'm the Chief Financial Planning Officer at Zenith Wealth Partners. We're a fee-only financial planning and investment advisory firm. We're also minority-owned, and we intentionally help people make smart and impactful financial decisions. More specifically, we help people in tech really understand their own personal finances and how they can maximize their benefits to fulfill their financial goals. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, so we have an exciting session, and we wanted to structure it so that the first part of the session is talking about what to do when you get a job in tech, and then we wanted to pivot to how can you prepare for layoffs, what are things that you should be thinking about in this environment where a lot of tech companies are having layoffs. So wanted to go ahead and kick things off, and all right, I'll start with
Let's
the
go for it.
questions. Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for your patience. And we like it to be interactive. So if anyone in the audience has a question while we're going through it, feel free to ask the question. We don't necessarily have to go through the questions that we have because we like it. Personal finance is so personal. If we could tailor it to your specific situation, that would be helpful. All right. So what do I do when I first get a job in the tech industry? What is the first thing that I should be thinking about when I get that offer?
That is a huge question. And before we hop into it, I do want to ask, is anyone currently right now looking for a job in tech? Can you raise your hand? Okay,
I
we have
love it.
quite a few people who are looking for opportunities. We're going to speak it into existence. You're going to find it this week. But when you first look for that job in tech, it's so important to understand what are the benefits available to you. So you want to make sure, number one, you understand what you need to cover your own personal financial goals. So how much money do you need to make to cover your own lifestyle? What about your savings? What about paying down any debts? A lot of people have student loans. How much is that going to cost? You want to make sure that you understand that whole piece. But on top of that, they're going to add some other layers. One is a bonus. Another one is probably going to come in the form of equity. Now, a lot of the times we might leave that equity alone and just say, you know what, that's kind of just there. I don't really understand it. I know it's a benefit. And that's not the correct way to think about it. You don't want to be unintentional when you're thinking about your equity. You want to be intentional about how you're maximizing that as a vehicle and a tool for your own finances. So when they ask you that question, which we know they will, and they're going to say, hey, you know, this is your offer. Do you have any questions? This is your opportunity to say, you know what, yes, this is a great starting point. But, you know, I think I'm looking for something a little bit more. This is where you can have the conversation and see where they have a little bit more wiggle room. Is it on the salary? Is it on the bonus? Is it on the equity? We've seen some clients who've really been able to make great relationships with recruiters, and they can ask them honestly, you know, with this company, where do you typically have a little bit more wiggle room? And then understanding where that is and making sure that you negotiate it. So intentionally thinking about what you need and then negotiating for the maximum benefit for your lifestyle.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. Really quick, I wanted to ask the audience, how familiar is everyone with equity compensation when it comes to tech roles? For a show of hands, if you feel really confident, can you raise your hand?
I'm seeing some waves.
Okay, intermediate? Okay,
We
and
got
then
some
how about
intermediate.
completely new? Okay, so we can kind of talk through
Yeah.
at a beginner level, and sorry to everyone who is in intermediate and advanced, but equity when it comes to tech companies, when you are a publicly traded company, that means that you are trading on the stock market. Typically, the company has shares, and people are able to buy ownership of the shares. So you become wealthier when those shares increase in price, and then when the shares decrease, that's when you lose your equity. So the goal is to find that unicorn company that either is a private company that is planning to go public, so a startup,
Yep.
or the other thing that you want to look at is a public company that is doing well or projected to do well. And I think that's why the AI space is very important too.
Absolutely.
To think about what startups are in this space who may potentially go public and their their stock price pop, then all of a sudden you build wealth overnight. Okay. All right.
Absolutely. And that's the fastest way that you can see people truly build wealth as well. So when we talk about equity, and it's probably going to come up often because it's something I'm really am passionate about, it is a very fast way to really see you build wealth in a fast fashion. Because if we think about our salary and our bonus, that's paid out as cash, right? But when we have equity, it has the opportunity to appreciate. So even if we just let it sit there as it vests, it has the opportunity to appreciate and overall increase our net worth.
Yes. And I'll give an example of a client that I have. When she started at her company, which is Microsoft, they said, we will give you X number of shares of Microsoft. And the price at the time was about $120.
Oh, wow.
Because this is during COVID when the
Yeah.
stock price wasn't doing that well. Now Microsoft is about $350, or they're in the...
Oh, she came up then.
Yeah, I think they're in the 300s or something like that. I'll have to double check that. So keep me honest, you all, if it's not that stock price online. But just to say that, typically when people buy stocks, they have to go into the marketplace, go on E-Trade and say, yes, I am using 120 of my own dollars in order to purchase this stock. However, when you work for a company, they say, in return for you working and building up this company, we will gift you the equity so you don't actually have to have the money to buy it. Why is that a big game changer? Because someone may not have that money to buy it, and
Right.
it goes into their compensation. And as the stock price increases, that's how their wealth increases.
And I think a really great point that you mentioned is it's given to you over time. You don't have to buy in. Now, some you do, and those are called stock options. We'll say that's part 2 of our presentation. Maybe we'll go to that part in a second.
Yeah.
But that's the really powerful piece is it's given to you. And now you can participate in the growth of a company. You really are helping to grow. And I think it's also important to remember that as these continue to grow, typically tech companies can appreciate anywhere from like 17 to 20% annually. Now, like, think about that number. It's not a promise. I always have to say that. My compliance person is here. But 17 to 20% on an annualized basis. Think about that high yield savings account that you probably see all the time on social media. Right now, they're getting about 4.5%. And then the overall stock market can typically do 10%. You're getting the opportunity to get access to something that has the potential to do more than both of those vehicles. So you want to make sure that you're not leaving anything on the table. But on top of that, you don't always have to hold it. You can always sell it and use it for other pieces of your life. Maybe a down payment on a house, maybe a wedding, maybe your kid's education. So this is really a tool and a vehicle to maximize your financial goals.
Yes. And I also want to give the flip side of, we talked about a company where the stock price popped and is doing well. We've also had clients that we worked with when they got their offer, they got RSUs, and the stock price was, let's just say the stock price was at $20. Now, some time has passed and the stock price is at $5. So she came in expecting for her RSUs to vest every year or every quarter, however it vests. Typically, like Chelsea mentioned, it does not happen all at one time. So she's thinking, oh, I'm going to get X amount of dollars and I'm going to be able to supplement my salary. But now, as a result of the company not doing well, she had to re-look at, one, does she want to stay at the company if it's not performing? And then 2, is there another way that she can negotiate her compensation since she thought the equity would supplement and it's not actually doing well?
Yes, listen, that is a tough one to think about because you talked about Microsoft, which is a really positive one. We won't say the name of the other company. However, They do have a bike. I'll let you interpret that as you will. But Adrienne, for someone who's new to the industry, what are some other benefits that they should think about as part of their overall compensation package?
Yes, I love to talk with my clients about benefits when it's related to healthcare. That's a big one. We know health insurance in the U.S. is tricky to navigate. It's typically sponsored by your company unless you go outside of your employer. A lot of tech companies do have excellent health benefits, but sometimes choosing your health plan can be difficult. So we a lot of times like to talk to our clients during open enrollment season, as well as when they get their offer, about what health insurance they should be looking into. The PPO, which is really popular, a lot of times people don't like to get the PPO because it's more expensive out of your paycheck, but what people don't realize is the deductible is typically a lot lower, and you typically have more things that are covered. So we can help our clients understand that. For example, I knew someone who was pregnant and they decided they didn't want to do the PPO, but then they got into the high deductible healthcare plan. It could be as low as $0 a month for you to have that plan, but her deductible is about $8,000. So what I always want everyone to remember is when you're picking a health insurance plan, look at what the deductible is for the year. If you have that amount in savings, think about if you had to pay $8,000 for your healthcare expenses, is that something that you're willing to do? And if you don't have the $8,000 in savings, are you willing to go into debt if something catastrophic happened? Because we could say, oh, I'm perfectly healthy, but what we do know is that freak accidents can happen. So that's what we really wanted to mention, as well as other types of insurance, disability insurance, life insurance. These are typically things that are not sexy, but your employer offers them at a reduced price, as opposed to if you were to get it outside of your employer. So understanding what your needs are when it comes to your life insurance, your disability, and then any other perks they have. Anything that I maybe missed?
I do want to just circle back on when you were touching on that deductible. So what you were saying is even though if we pay less monthly in that premium, we have to have $8,000 worth of expenses before the policy will kick in?
Essentially. So it really depends on your specific insurance rules, the co-insurance, what is your copay. But a lot of times the high deductible healthcare plans say we won't pay anything until you hit your deductible.
Yeah.
So if your deductible is $8,000, they'll say, yeah, primary care, if you need surgery, any treatments that you need to have, MRIs, they're not paying it unless you hit that deductible. So that's a big thing to think about. Whereas PPOs, a lot of times will have a copay and they say, yep, pay $200 and then we'll cover the rest.
Is there like a savings account we could use instead to like help with that?
Oh, good question. So who's familiar with the HSA? Okay, we love the HSA because if you do have a high deductible healthcare plan, you are able to tuck money in. And why do people love the HSA? 3 tax benefits. The first is it reduces your taxable income on your taxes. So when you get your W-2, you'll see that that number in box 1 isn't what you actually made. It's because they deducted what you put into your HSA. And then once you put the money into your HSA, you can keep it for as long as you want. If you leave your job next month, you can take that HSA money with you. And as long as you use that HSA money for medical expenses, approve things, and there's no one over your shoulder checking, but you normally do have to keep receipts and say, yep, all right, I went to the therapist, I used this money for the therapist, so I'm reimbursing myself for my HSA. You do not have to pay any taxes on that money you pull out of your HSA for medical expenses. So that's another benefit. And then once you get into retirement, and this is one thing that people don't know, is once you get into retirement, that HSA, you are able to use it for long-term care premiums, Medicare premiums, anything like that, or you could just use it as a general retirement account without penalty. So that is another benefit of the HSA.
You know what's funny is I was actually shopping on Walgreens the other day, and they got the little buttons now where it says like HSA eligible. So you can even see like some of the things that you purchase, whether it's vitamins or anything health related. It doesn't just have to be like specifically from the pharmacy, but anything can really be HSA eligible if you have this type of account.
Yes. So that's basically what you should do or think about as you are joining a new tech company. But yes, what question? Sure. Yes, so you can have an HSA outside of your current employer. However, the limit to how much money you can put into it is based on that annual limit. I think it's like 3,500 or somewhere in the 3,000s. The other thing that's important to think about with the HSA is that you have to have a high deductible healthcare plan. So there is a specific healthcare plan, and you may say, "Oh, I have a PPO and my deductible is 5,000." That's not technically the high deductible healthcare plan, and it will let you know if you can have access to the HSA. Now, if you don't have a high deductible healthcare plan, you do have other options. There is the flexible savings account, which is a healthcare account. You can deduct money from your paycheck just like the HSA. However, I always caution people, it is use it or lose it. If you do not use that money throughout the year, you will not be able to use it later on. You have a small buffer of stuff that can roll over, but typically, if you leave your job, you can't roll it over. So the HSA is a lot more flexible. But the FSA is another cool thing that you can do. And what we'll normally do with our clients is say, what medical expenses can you anticipate this year? And I had a client, she's like, yeah, I go to the orthodontist, it's $300 a month. I said, well, at the bare minimum, we need to be putting $300 a month aside into your HSA or FSA because we know that you'll actually use it. So we have a tax benefit for you, we're reducing your taxable income, and we're still able to pay for your medical expenses. I know sometimes people are like, well, that seems like a lot of money to be coming out of my paycheck and not hitting my bank account. But then I have to make sure that we recalibrate our mindset and say, we're going to spend that money anyway. Will we rather spend it tax advantaged, or do you want to be taxed on this extra $300 that you knew you had to spend anyway?
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I wanted to touch on, because you talked about taxes a little bit, and a common comment that sometimes we'll hear from our clients are, they get really excited, they get this new job in tech, and then they go to file their taxes, and they're like, whoa, I owe more money than I thought. So can you talk about that? What are the different pieces that are taxed as part of the benefits or your compensation?
Yes, that's a great question, Chelsea. So typically we talked about a salary structure, and we'll keep it simple: salary, bonus, and then RSUs. So of course, everyone knows their salary is taxed, and you set up your withholding in the portal and make sure that's set up like either I'm single, married, filing jointly, whatever, your dependents, whatnot. So that's typically your withholding. But then for the RSUs and bonuses, those are typically taxed at a standard 22% rate for federal. What happens with our clients in tech is they're typically in a 32, 35, 37% bracket. So if we're taxing it at 22% and we still have another, 12, 15% left that we need to tax, that is problematic, and that's why a lot of people owe. So things that we could do to reevaluate, if the company allows it, you can increase your withholding for your bonuses or your RSUs, so that's an option. You can say, oh, I want some of my bonus to go to a 401k if that's an option, and that can help you reduce your taxable liability. You can also have tax projections done, and I would say, well, Chelsea, do you want to talk about that? How does the tax projections work with our clients?
Yeah, so that's something that we do with our clients twice a year because it is an ever-moving landscape when we are thinking about taxes, especially if you work in tech. Your salary is probably pretty consistent, but some of you may have the opportunity for quarterly bonuses, which can fluctuate depending on the performance of your team. On top of that, we have to acknowledge that equity, even though it's really nice that you get it and it's granted over a quarterly or monthly cadence, it's not free. So that is taxed the same way as a bonus, even though it's not a cash bonus and it's stock. So when Adrienne was talking about that 22%, it's not just the cash bonus, it's also the equity piece as well. So that's something important that you want to consider is what are all the different pieces that are going to be taxed, and then have a projection. For a lot of our clients, especially in 2022, have to acknowledge that the tech sector really kind of took a hit, right? So it was a little bit lower. Over this past, first 5 months of this year, tech has been on fire. So we've had to adjust some of our projections because the expectations that we had in the growth of the stock has really jumped significantly. So now we need to make sure we have a plan around, hey, you may owe more taxes because now your equity is vesting at a higher price point, which is great. You're getting more money. However, this is going to increase your tax liability. So let's make a plan today. So when you go to file in April, there's not even a surprise. You're going to your tax person, you're filing, and then they're going to say, hey, the equity was a little bit higher, so you're going to have to owe. And then you'll say, Don't worry about it. Chelsea and Adrienne already told me we already have some money set aside in savings. We already know. But I think that's the power of having somebody to coach you through this process.
Yes, and another example I will give is one of your clients who doesn't like to have a big tax bill at the end of the year. We've set them up to pay estimated tax payments during the year.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. You're paying the IRS, but instead of saying, "Oh, I owe the IRS $7,500 in April," in June and September and January of next year, I'm going to just go ahead and pay $2,500 every time I get my bonus or every time I get some RSUs paid out. As a result, you've credited towards the IRS the payments, and now when it's tax time, you may break even or owe a little bit, but you won't have as much of a tax burden. So that's also an alternative. Okay.
Absolutely.
Any other questions before we segue to our next topic? Are we good?
Yes, so.
All righty. Where do I want to go with this? What are the best options for saving for retirement, considering my company's retirement plan and my RSU grants?
Yeah. So a lot of tech companies will offer what's called a 401k. And a 401k is pretty common where you can contribute money from your paycheck into there. There's what's called a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k. A Roth 401k is not the same as a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA is something that you open separately on your own, typically at any custodian of your choice, where a 401k is offered by your employer. So what they'll do is they'll ask you, how much do you want to contribute from your paycheck? Is there a fixed dollar amount? Is there a percentage? But you always want to make sure you're getting as close or at least reaching the amount that your employer is contributing as a match. Now, it's important to remember that if they're matching, and the number could be anywhere from 3 to 10% of your salary, right? So you want to get close to that number. Sometimes companies don't match, but even if they don't, it's really important that you're contributing to your retirement, because retirement is the one thing that we cannot take a loan out for. So we know that we can take a loan out when we buy a house, we buy a car, even if we want to get some additional schooling or education, but we really can't take a loan out if we want to stop working and really take care of ourselves. So we have to make sure that we're putting some money aside for that. On top of that, your match may not be the full contribution. So that's important to keep in mind. Even if you're contributing up to the match, you probably can put a little bit more. The maximum contribution is roughly $23,000. So you want to make sure that you're getting as close to that as possible. And if you can't, that is completely fine. We work with a lot of clients where each year they'll increase it about 1%, so they get closer and closer to that number. So it's not an all or nothing, but you're slowly maximizing your opportunities to get closer to that number. Some companies will have what's called a after-tax contribution, and this is kind of what's called like a mega backdoor Roth. So what you can do is put even more money into retirement. It's a little bit more complicated, but where it can add value is you're putting more money for retirement and in a tax advantage vehicle. So you don't have to worry about any taxes if you're buying or selling within the account. On top of that, you want to think about that individual retirement account. That's something that you can open on your own. You have a little bit more flexibility on how you can invest it, but the nice thing is it stays with you. So even if your employer switches, and I think that's a good topic to discuss next, if they switch their 401k provider, you don't have to worry about wondering, well, where is my money? Now I have to call that old HR person and figure out my login and have that uncomfortable conversation where it's like, hey, I haven't seen you in 2 years, but I can't access my 401k. You want to make sure that you at least transition it to your new 401k at your new job, or transition it into an IRA, so then you have access to your money at all times.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have a question. I'm in tech, hypothetically, and I want to live the FIRE lifestyle. I'll do this for 10, 15 years, stack my money. So should I be putting my money in a 401k if I want to retire at 45?
Oof, good question. Well, what are you going to do after 45? Now I'm curious.
Travel somewhere cheap.
Okay. Are you going to work at all, or it's just going to be you're going to kick your feet up?
I'll be consulting.
Okay. So then what you're going to do is you're going to have probably a little bit of income to sustain your lifestyle. Maybe you're traveling all across the globe. You still want to put some money aside for retirement, but there's a specific account that we really like, and that's the Roth IRA. The reason why we like that account so much is, number one, you're putting the money in, and then it grows tax-free, but it's the only retirement account that you can actually pull from up to what you contributed, and you don't have to worry about a tax or a penalty. Typically, if you put money in a 401k, if you need it, you're going to pay tax and a 10% penalty when you need that money. So even if there's 10,000 in there, you're really probably only getting like 6,500 after everything. But with a Roth IRA, if you put in 7,000, it grows to 10,000. You can pull out that initial 7,000, and you don't have to worry about a tax or penalty. So you will get that exact amount. So making sure that you're maximizing money in a Roth IRA or after-tax contributions can be really helpful as you're traveling the world and living a tax-free life.
Okay, thank you. And yes, question. Is there a mic? I don't know.
Rihanna.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yes, thank you for that question. So the question is, if I have a Roth IRA, can I have a Roth IRA if I make over the income limit? And the answer is yes, technically. So there's something called a backdoor Roth that we use for our high income clients, and a lot of those are in tech. The one caveat is that you typically cannot have, well, you can have a rollover IRA, but it just makes the taxation a little bit more tricky. But let's just say that I have a 401k with my employer, and I also want to put additional money into a Roth IRA. Why? Because I want to put money in an account that I pay taxes on now and don't have to pay the taxes on later. So what Chelsea alluded to. How the backdoor Roth works, and the limit for this year, 7,000, is you open up a traditional IRA, not a rollover IRA, not a Roth IRA. You open up a traditional IRA. You put your money into that traditional IRA. Let's just say I'm putting 7,000 in there. This is okay because you make enough. Like, there are no income limits to put a non-deductible contribution into your traditional IRA. How do we make sure that this is a non-deductible contribution? When you file your tax return, you must file a Form 8606. This is telling the IRS that I am putting money that is coming from my bank account, I've already paid taxes on it, into a traditional IRA. I am not deducting this money and trying to get any benefits on my tax return. So that's the first step. Then you open up a Roth IRA. Great, so now we have the Roth IRA. Can we put money directly into there? No, I cannot just pull the money from my bank account and put it into my Roth IRA. What we have to do is take that money we have in our traditional IRA and do a Roth conversion to the Roth IRA. Typically, this will be a taxable event to do a Roth conversion. However, what we did tell the IRS was that the money that I put into my traditional IRA, I am not paying any tax. I am not deducting this. This is a non-deductible contribution. So once we tell them that and roll it into the Roth IRA, now this is non-taxable event. People ask, well, what should I do with my money in the traditional IRA? Should I invest it? Should I do something with it? No, keep it in cash and then roll it into the Roth. And why do we want to keep it in cash? Because we don't want to have that 7,000 appreciate to 8,000 and have to pay taxes on that additional 1,000. On the flip side, we also don't want to put 7,000 in there and the market drops to 5,000, and now I'm only doing a Roth conversion for $5,000. So that's how you do the backdoor Roth IRA. So it's not really a hard process. It just takes a little bit more record keeping, and they want to act like, oh, it's a little bit more difficult or it's hush hush. And then Chelsea also talked about the mega backdoor Roth with the after-tax 401k. So yes, you can have a Roth IRA and Roth dollars if you are a high income earner. And the other way you can do that is by having a Roth 401k and putting your money directly into a Roth 401k, and then you can roll that into a Roth IRA when you leave.
Yeah, and Adrienne, I think you said it best. There's a little bit of like maneuvering you have to do.
Yeah.
So if you want to connect with us afterwards also to learn more about how you can implement this, feel free to connect with us. We'll be here.
Yeah, you all don't know how many times I've had to do like a Form 8606 for people and say like, oh, we need to do this for 2021 and 2020. So yeah, okay, pretty much that. All right,
I think there was one other question, yeah.
So you mentioned that you can withdraw from the Roth IRA penalty-free up to what you contribute. Is that the same for the Roth 401k?
Good question. So when it's in the Roth 401k, you need to transition it to a Roth IRA first to be able to do that. If it's in your current Roth 401k and you're a current employee there, that doesn't necessarily work. You have to wait until you're not an employee there anymore, then you can transition it into a Roth IRA, and then you can maximize that option.
Oh, okay. So I would have to quit or get fired.
Pretty much. Or if you have an old Roth 401k sitting around, that is also correct. But I think that's actually a great segue into what we're seeing a lot in the tech landscape right now, right?
With the layoffs?
With the layoffs, with a lot of transitions, with work, a lot of people have to, rethink or course correct what their career could look like in tech. And we've seen it at Google and Meta and Microsoft and all the big names where they call it restructuring their teams, but more or less they are layoffs. So Adrienne, how can we think about, if we're worried about potentially getting laid off, how can we start setting up our finances?
Right. The first thing that we always emphasize is having an emergency fund for our clients. And we like for it to be at least 6 months of fixed expenses. Now, of course, as a financial planner, it's easy to say, yep, you need $30,000, go ahead and save that. And people are like, well, how? Life is expensive. And we understand that, and we have to create a game plan. A lot of that is automated contributions. And then life happens in between that. Of course, it sounds good to say, yep, I'm going to put $2,000 a month into savings. But then one month you have something happen with your car. Another month you have something with your health. You may have something happen with your kids. This all happens, and it's all fine. But try your best to get that 6 months emergency fund. And once you have that, you can feel more comfortable. But what we have seen for our clients in tech who have gotten laid off is typically they get a severance package. I love when a client gets a severance package and they get a job right away. And I know that's very privileged to say because the market is not built like that. But what typically happens is that funds their emergency fund, allows them to pay off debt, maybe even put a lot of money into their retirement because they have this lump sum that got paid out. And now we can focus on building now that they have their cash flow. They might not even need to be putting money into savings every month because they may have a $100,000 windfall that they're just tucking away. That's a big thing that we typically see. Other ways that you can set up, I don't really want to talk outside of the financial realm, so I don't really want to talk too much about keeping your resume up to date and whatnot, but
there are going to be great people tomorrow who are going to talk about that for sure.
Yeah. So having the emergency fund is probably the biggest thing, and then understanding what benefits that you have with your employer. And you may not have to think about it while you're currently here, but then once you get into that layoff world, understanding what benefits did I have with my employer and where do I need to start looking for the benefits now. What's so common, and number one, is healthcare. Typically, people don't realize how expensive health insurance is because their employer pays for such a large percentage of it. You may be paying anywhere from 0 to 10 to 15% of the actual cost of healthcare. People are shocked when they get the COBRA quote and they see it's $1,000 or maybe even $2,200 for people with families. So we have to think, what is the alternative? You did have a qualifying event happen. You lost your job. Get on the marketplace, see what the health insurance is there. It may be cheaper than $1,000 a month, and that may be where you're best suited. But then we've also had a client who was laid off, and she said, okay, well, we have this really great health insurance, and I need to have surgery later this year. Can you look at my new job and my new benefits and determine if I should get on this one? Well, the deductible was a lot higher. She already hit her deductible for her other job. So it's just hey, do you just want to keep the money because you already have a pot of money that you can use for COBRA? So she was one of our examples of someone who lost their job and then got a job. So we're able to really play with it and say, okay, what benefits can we keep from your old employer and which ones do we need to keep now? Life insurance is a big one. Most people have life insurance attached to their job, and we kind of don't think about it. If you lost your job and then something happened and you didn't have life insurance, what would happen? So do you have a family to support? What would happen to your home, for example? Do you have parents or siblings or nieces and nephews you want to support? So going and getting a cheap term life insurance policy is also an opportunity for planning once you're laid off, because you do need life insurance, and it doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think one other piece to consider is a lot of people got some really high paying jobs. I would say probably 2021, 2022, which I think also led to a lot of tech companies kind of doing this course correction. So sometimes the prices that you may hear from your friends of all these higher paying jobs isn't necessarily what's actually available now. in the marketplace. So you may have to adjust your spending and course correct as you're just repositioning yourself in this new role and in a career in a new company. So understanding how you can adjust your spending, revisiting your budget, and allocating what your money should look like. And then on top of that, understanding how your bonus or your equity, like we talked about before, can help sustain any other pieces of your life. So maybe if your salary is a little bit lower now, you can use that bonus for any travel as you have it coming up in the future. Or you can use that to max out your Roth IRA because you don't necessarily have space in your monthly cash flow. So think about how you can use these different tools as you're adjusting your spending and your budget.
I love that you mentioned spending because that is another consideration if you encounter a layoff. What things in my budget can I cut off? Mm-hmm. So for me personally, the gym's not getting cut off. That's still my mental health, so I actually still need to go. But true. There could be some people say, yeah, I'm going to pull back. I have more time. When I was working, I had to eat out all the time because I didn't have time to actually cook meals. But is that something that we're doing now, going to the grocery store? And again, this is not sexy either, but telling people, hey, you can't go to Wegmans. You need to go to Aldi. You need to go to Lidl. I'm serious. I tell my clients and they hate me. They're like, I want to go to Wegmans. I love organic food. I want to go to Whole Foods. But it's just so much more expensive. And then we have to think about health is wealth. But there are other alternatives to living a healthy lifestyle that may not be cutting into your budget as much. So that's another big consideration. So going through your cash flow, really tracking your spending because you don't know when your next position will come. And then also another thing that we wanted to call out was, say I don't have cash and I want to pull from my 401k. Is there anything else that I can do to float if I'm unemployed?
Yes, so you can also look at that equity if you do have it as well. So that's something to keep in mind if you did hold on to that equity and you're wondering, like, what should I do with it? Do I want to hold on to it? Do I want to sell it? We always encourage our clients to think and say, hey, if you had the cash, would you actually buy into this company? Like, do you believe in the growth? Do you believe in the potential? And if the answer is not really, you kind of just got it because you needed a job, it maybe doesn't make sense to hold on to it. And you should probably cash that in and use that for some other pieces of your financial life. A really great analysis that we like to do for clients is understanding the growth trajectory and seeing what the marketplace is saying. Do they feel like there's a lot of positive sentiment around the stock? Is there a lot of growth potential? Or maybe we do want to hold on to it and there's other levers that we want to pull. Or, you know what, is the overall marketplace saying, hey, this isn't a great stock, we don't want to hold on to it. So then we can also sell it as well. So that's a really great way where we can refund your cash flow, your savings, and then if we want to put some more money to retirement.
Okay, thank you. I think are we about time? Any other questions?
Well, I was just thinking, I guess, past the layoff, if I'm thinking of pivoting into entrepreneurship instead of looking for a new tech job, is there anything else I should be considering in addition to all of the other things you guys listed?
Yeah. So we listed health insurance, we listed retirement, anything. We talked about life insurance and disability insurance. Any big things?
Honestly, I think savings is the most important thing. A lot of us, when we start a business, we don't necessarily have anyone that's going to fund our business. Now, hopefully one day that changes and more women and people of color can get access to capital, but we all know our country is not there yet. So you need to make sure you have enough saved so that you can fund and sustain your business. So Adrienne brought up a great point of having that 6 months, which we think is great. But as a business owner, if you can have more, that's even better. So you want to create a business plan, understand how much would you need for 1 year to run your business. And imagine you brought in absolutely no revenue and like it was just expenses going out. Try to see if you can at least have that saved. So if your business does better, fantastic, you're in a great place. But if it doesn't, you know you at least have enough to cover that as you're growing and fine-tuning your business. And it's not going to eat into anything that you need to pay your mortgage or your rent or the health insurance like Adrienne mentioned. So really making sure that you have that money set aside, but also a business plan as well.
Yeah, and I would say having a business, one thing that we do see is that people have all these business plans and projections for how everything will work out if everything was 100% perfect, but we know that life is not like that. So what we have to do is say, well, what would happen if you decided to start your company and then you're going to partner with this organization and you all are going to put this out in 6 months? What if there's a delay and now it's 9 months and 12 months? Are you prepared for that? And what can we do to mitigate that outside of having our savings? So we always want to think about worst case scenario and not necessarily best case scenario when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sure.
Sorry about that last question. Whole or term life insurance? There's an ongoing debate about it. Which one do you prefer and why?
Dun, dun, dun.
I'm a term girl myself. It's a tricky subject. I used to work in insurance, so that's why I'm like, I think that whole life has its place. Don't get me wrong, but I think for most people, term probably is the best because it's cheap, right? You can just get a small policy probably for $10 a month if you're young and healthy. Now, we do have some clients who say, well, I don't want to pay into something then never see the benefit of it. If we have a client with that mindset, we'll tell them whole life is the plan for you and they want to keep it until they're in their 80s. But for me personally, term, just because I like for our clients to be able to maximize other opportunities where they may be able to get more of a tax benefit. So instead of putting $500 a month into whole life, let's put $10 into term life and put $490 into your 401k and get that pre-tax benefit.
Yeah.
So just as an example.
I think you said it best, and it really just comes back to like the opportunity cost, right? What would you prefer? In the example you provided, maybe that whole life policy is $500 a month that you're locked into permanently or indefinitely, where a term, it's a shorter time, maybe it's 30 years, but it's $60 a month. So you have to think like, okay, if I was paying $60 instead of the $500, what would I do with that excess money? Would I save it? Would I invest it? Would I pay down debt? Would I use it to start a business? Or am I just gonna kind of like use it and spend money? So I think that's why sometimes a lot of people are like, use whole life, you know, lock it in. It'll make sure your money is saved. But if you are working with somebody and you make sure you're intentional with your dollars, you may have an opportunity to really maximize it and use it to its fullest potential and invest it for growth.
Yeah, I like the idea of maximizing all the vehicles that we have available to us, 401k, Roth IRA, HSA. If we've brokerage account, once we've maximized all of these and we're like, what other options do we have? We can start to look at whole life. But I love the point that you made about flexibility. Say you wanted to go work with a financial planner or a financial advisor and you just got your new job in tech and they present a financial plan for you and they want you to put $500 a month into whole life. 2 years later, we're having tech layoffs and there's no flexibility. You hit the insurance company up and you're like, hey, I just got laid off. Can I like put a pause on my policy? They're like, no, you use it, you lose it. Well, I already paid, $10,000 into this. How much money can I get? Your cash surrender value is $500. Dang! Whereas the term life, you wouldn't probably feel like that because you're like, okay, well, I just got rid of this $10 policy. Well, let me just go ahead and get a new one. Or I can keep it up because it's only $10.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you everyone for the questions. If you want to learn more about our firm, Zenith Wealth Partners, and how you can connect with us, Adrienne, where can they find us?
Yes, so we are on the internet, zenithwealth.partners. We also are on Instagram. It's Zenith Wealth Partners on Instagram. Yeah. And then our emails are our first name, so Adrienne and Chelsea at Net Worth Zenith. Then I'm also on Instagram, Adrienne Davis CPA.
And I'm Chelsea.cfp.
Yeah,
Keep
but we're, if you all have any questions related to your personal financial situations, have a consultation with us. We're open books. Just make sure to let us know where you found us so that we could put you to our priority list. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.